Hey everybody, my name is Shawn Sheehy. I'm in Chicago and I'm a paper engineer.
Superpassions.
As a paper engineer, I make books. I develop pop-ups for books, and I work in artist books for starters. So that's handmade books, limited small editions that are sold like at galleries rather than bookstores.
Very cool.
And then I have a number of trade books that are out in the world. So those are the things that you can buy at a bookstore, and they're massive editions, larger editions. And buy them on Amazon, it's that kind of thing. But, shop at your small independent bookstores when you can.
Oh yeah, we've got quite a few of those in Chicago.
We got a bunch. And then I teach a ton of workshops. I teach workshops all the time. Once a week, if not slightly more. Teaching other people how to make pop-ups, which is fun for me. And, like lots of folks who have careers in the arts, making things doesn't necessarily always support in the way you need. And so, a line of teaching is always useful. But paper engineering skills aren't something that are taught academically. So
I don't think I was ever taught that in like my art classes in high school for sure.
Yeah, no. And it's a great way to teach geometry. So I support it 100%.
So the first thing I was wondering is straight up what you call your art style, because like I was initially just thinking it was all called pop-up books, but you've used a couple of terms. Is there like a single umbrella term for all of this like art?
We've kind of settled on paper engineer. And by we, I mean that, as a field, it's not very old. And we had kind of a big renaissance in the US, like in the 80s, early 90s, primarily driven by a guy whose name is Robert Sabuda. You may well have seen his books if you've ever looked at pop-up books, because
there's a good chance I've seen his work and don't even know his name.
Yeah, exactly. And right along with him is Matthew Reinhardt, who was at one time a talent that Robert was cultivating. But right now, Matthew is kind of top dog. He's doing all of the Disney stuff.
Oh, that's so cool. They've got like one person doing all of Disney's pop-up works.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Because it's a tiny field. It's a tiny field. I'm frankly astonished that the both of us are in Chicago, because I'm the only guy in Chicago that does this, professionally, for sure, professionally.
Well, how did you get into, like, let's just go like start to now. How did you get into paper engineering?
So I did not do it in any sort of directed or intentional way. I grew up with makery folks. My dad makes furniture at an amateur level, but high-end amateur level. Same with my mom with making clothes. So this idea of growing up in a home where people are making dimensional things using patterns. But then I went to Valparaiso University, studied education, and did that for a very short period of time, and mostly in fairly atypical venues, like the YMCA mostly. And then went back to school to study graphic design, and loved that. And at the end of that graphic design program, there was a capstone course with a fairly open-ended project, where basically they were asking us to simply make a book and to do something interesting for ourselves. And I chose to make a pop-up book, and it was super fun. It's not terribly clever. It's not clever engineering wise, though. I'll stand by the writing.
I want to circle back after this to like what you find super clever, because I am very curious about that.
Who kind of knew where I was and where I was going, and mentioned Columbia College here in Chicago
Hmm.
that had just launched an MFA program in book and paper arts.
They've got so many cool programs.
They do. They do. This one unfortunately died, but it was great while it lasted. It was only it was very brief. And so in that first year, I went down and visited. I came down and visited, and was heavily recruited in that moment. And yeah, by virtue of this book that I made as a design student, I got a fellowship. So I came down and studied, and I've been in Chicago ever since, making books, and still doing some design on the side. But it's an important part of the whole mix, so I don't slough it off. But
So I want to hear about like some of these like super clever, like what makes something more clever or less clever? Can you show off some like super clever things if you have them?
yeah, okay, so go on pause for a second. I'm going to show you the actual book that I made as a design student, and it's raw.
Raw.
Yeah, because I didn't know what I was doing, and the adhesive is rubber cement, which does not have a shelf life.
How old is this?
Short shelf life. 1997.
Oh wow.
It's been a minute. Yeah. All right. So here's that book, and all kind of papers that I found. I was studying in Madison, so there were some nice paper shops where I could get materials. But the basic structural design here is this sort of fan-shaped thing with a cut paper illustration that is mounted to it, a sort of nice artsy paper mounted to vellum, and then some copy. And it's a Counting on the Marsh. It's a counting book. It's a concept book, as we say in education. It teaches a concept. It's kind of going from sunset to nightfall in the last spread, and it's a little bit of an ecosystem study as well. The inhabitants of the marsh and what they do and why they're important, but all in very short.
And it looks nicely abstracted. Oh, like these are really great illustrations.
Yeah, I mean, they're fine. They're fine. But you can see, structurally, it's the same thing going on every time. Mm-hmm. So nothing terribly sophisticated, whatever, nothing super fancy, whatever those words are that I used earlier. And strangely, maybe, I don't know, when I was in grad school and taking a book arts program, the focus was, all right, learn how to make paper, learn how to print, learn how to bind. And so my efforts were all focused in those three directions. So I really only made one pop-up book when I was in grad school. And I basically redid this, but I did it right. And it's not cut paper. It was actually linoleum block printed, so that I could edition it in a way that didn't take 10 years of my life.
So quick aside question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
When you say editioning, you mean like making it in a way that you can produce a lot of copies of it. Is that normally something that has to be hand done, or is there like some way to make that go faster?
Oh, there's definitely ways to make it go faster. Printing is a way of editioning. Basically, you run something through a press, you can make 10 quick copies, as opposed to handwriting one very slow copy. Commercially, cutting is done in an edition focused kind of way because everything is cut using dies.
So you would cut everything at once and then like paste it all together all at once.
Yeah, sort of, because hand assembly assembly is still done by hand. There's no way to automate
And when I was a kid, I always pictured these like impressive, like very specific machines in factories that would like have like one station where the machine would like cut it at, and one station where everything would be pasted by robot hands, because that's what industrial films taught me.
Right, which is not unreasonable. It's also not correct. Yeah. So instead, imagine a giant pole barn in now mostly Southeast Asia. China still does a lot, but the economy in China has evolved to such a degree that it's now not as viable. So yeah, imagine a giant pole barn in Thailand where you've got 200, usually women. It's usually how that works out. Sitting at long tables and doing piecework for months at a time. Because it's publishing, because it's the art world, because it's kids stuff. There's attention given to the politics of it, for sure.
So
Yeah.
Jumping back to the creative side, I'm curious what like the most impressive things you've seen or done in paper engineering have been.
Oh yeah. Yes, that's the arc we're on right now. So pivoting from that book, so here's the second trade book. So it's large, which for me is fun, and it's all part of the scene too, just to make things big and exciting. So I'm taking a much more sculptural approach with this book. Sort of really,
ooh, that moved up.
Yeah, it's got a little kick to it there. And I did this project through Candlewick Press. I'm the paper engineer, but there was also an illustrator that was involved. You can see on these engineered spreads, everything is just basically flat color. But then they got an illustrator involved to kind of create second spreads that carry a lot of information and more detail in the illustration. So, this is what I would call a much more sophisticated pop-up book, for sure.
Like I'm seeing on some of the earlier pages, like you're not supposed to just see it in the fully unfolded state. You're supposed to see it while it's unfolding.
Right. Actuation through animation. Use some fancy words. Yeah, this is my favorite spread from this book. I love this turtle.
Oh wow!
And in 60 seconds, it's basically a book that envisions Chicago in the 2000 year ahead future, and there's been some event, and we've had a lot of die off, and then here's what survives, and this is what it evolves to become, basically. So, so here's a Matthew Reinhardt book. He's the Disney guy.
This definitely looks like something that's going to be put into an edition of at least 10,000, maybe 100,000 or more. It looks mass market. That's all I'm saying.
It's mass market. Yeah. I would imagine six figures. And then some, yeah, because it's part of what makes it work, especially for the big dogs, if I may, is employing economies of scale. Mm-hmm. If you make 10 books, they cost $100 a piece, but if you make 100 books, they cost $10 a piece. That's not accurate, of course, but you get the idea. If you make a ton of something, you can sell it for less per unit. So Transformers, lots of illustration. This is a great spread. It's about Transformers, so the whole thing is that you're going to pull, and if I can get my finger under there.
Oh, wow. That's sophisticated.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God.
One of Matthew's big innovations, and he's returned to it a couple of times, is to do a thing like this, where you've got this central structure and then you pull a front lever, and then there's a secondary reveal, which is really nice. Yeah. Yeah, he's a big deal. Let me jump to the big. So this just great, massive, something is stuck somewhere.
That's taller than the page.
Yeah, it's taller. Yeah, easily. It's massive.
Wow.
Yeah. And just, you can see how that the arm kind of kicks over there as it closes, and it all just works beautifully and repetitiously. Yeah, with almost no damage.
That's fantastic.
There's definitely some. Yeah, I have friends who have a child who, at the time that I got this book, was maybe like 7 or 8. And he sat there and he just, he did this over and over again for 10 minutes.
Well, they're kind of toys as well.
Yeah, it's a toy as well. Yeah. So here's a little piece of damage right there. For example, there are a number of places in this book that have worn out from overuse, but that's what they're for. If I want it to be not damaged, I need to buy it and then put it in a plastic bag and stick it in the closet and not let anyone look at it. Yeah.
So I kind of want to bring this to a close, just because I'm aiming for like 20 to 30 minutes for these.
Sure.
But this is kind of a two-parter. What would you tell someone looking to make their first pop-up? And like, plug your stuff is the second part.
All right. So the big plug for me would be a visit to my website, ShawnSheehy.com. Of course,
I'll put a link in the description.
Excellent. Thank you. Like I say, teaching workshops all the time. A workshop calendar is up there. And it kind of nicely segues into how people can, do their own thing. Because it's not easy to pick up by yourself, though many of us do, because it's the only way. But come take a workshop, and I'll tell you what I know. And also there are a couple of really great how-to books that are in the market. Let me go grab those reels super quick. So here are those 2 books. Doing some more plugging here. Elements of Pop-Up, James Diaz and David Carter. Pop-Up, Design and Paper Mechanics, Duncan Birmingham. Duncan also has a YouTube channel where he has lots of great how-tos.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, they're really good. They're really good. You can just look up his name. Elements of Pop-Up. There is a sequel to this called The Complexities of Pop-Up. That is being supported by a Kickstarter campaign, actually, and a boutique publisher, Proposition Press in Boulder. And folks can buy that book if they want to get it as well, though they won't get it until the fall because they haven't produced it yet. And
I'm just looking at that, and I'm guessing there's pop-up elements in that book, just the size of it.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that is perfect.
Yeah, it's a really great tool. With the movable stuff. You can open it up to the back and look at how things work from the inside.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for a half hour of your time, Shawn.
Absolutely, Asher. This was fun.
Superpassions.